Hello, sixth grade cowboys and cowgirls. This is your math lesson 2.2 on identifying opposites and absolute value of rational numbers. It says recall that positive numbers are greater than zero. They are located to the right of zero on a number line. Negative numbers are less than zero. They are located to the left of zero on a number line. So here it says water levels with respect to sea level, which has elevation of zero, may be measured at beach tidal basins. Water levels below sea level are represented by negative numbers. A. The table shows the water level at a tidal basin at different times during a day. Graph the level for each time on the number line. So at 4 a.m. it was 3 5/10. So positive 3 5/10 is halfway between 3 and 4. Okay, at 8 a.m. it was 2 5/10, so 2 5/10 is halfway between 2 and 3. So at noon it was a negative 5/10. Negative 5/10 is halfway between 0 and negative 1. So about right there. And at 4 p.m. negative 2 5/10, which is halfway between negative 2 and negative 3. And 8 p.m. is back to a positive 5/10, which is halfway between 0 and 1. How did you know where to graph a negative 5/10? Well, you know that negative 5/10 is actually greater than negative 1. It's also half of negative 1. So greater than negative 1, which means it would be to the right of negative 1. Okay. At what time or times is the level closest to sea level? Sea level again is 0. So at what times is it closest to 0? Well, that would be at noon, which was a negative 5/10, and at 8 p.m., which is a positive 5/10. So those are the same distance from 0 and closest to 0. D, which point is located halfway between negative 3 and negative 2? Well, that would be a negative 2 5/10. Which is D, by the way. So if we label these, I guess we should label these. So 3 5/10 is A. 2 5/10 is B. Negative 5/10 is C. Negative 2 5/10 is D. And positive 5/10 is E. So which point is the same distance from 0 as D? So D is a negative 2 5/10. So the opposite of that would be a positive 2 5/10, which is B. Again, those are the same distance from 0. Great. So it says, until June 24th, 1997, the New York Stock Exchange priced the value of a share of stock in eighths, such as 27 1/8 or at 41 3/4. The chance in value of a share of stock from day to day was also represented in eighths as a positive or negative number. The table shows the change in value of a stock over 2 days. Graph the change in stock value for Wednesday and its opposite on the number line. Well, negative 4 1/4 would be below 0, so it would be just close to negative 4, between negative 4 and negative 5. Then it says graph the opposite. So opposite of negative 4 1/4 would be a positive 4 1/4, which would be just between 4 and 5, but really close to 4. So the opposite of negative 4 1/4 is obviously positive 4 1/4. So the opposite of the change in stock value for Wednesday is 4 1/4. Here's some examples. It said, what are the opposites of these numbers? So the opposite of 7 would be negative 7. The opposite of negative 3 5/10 would be a positive 3 5/10. Remember, this is opposite, not absolute value. So the opposite of 2 25/100 would be negative 2 25/100. The opposite of 9 1/3 would be a negative 9 1/3. Need to stop and catch up. You can pause it. Again, make sure you're taking good notes and write down as much as you can. Okay, example 2 says the table shows the average low temperature in January in one location during a 5-year span. Find the absolute value of the average January low temperature in 2009. So, find the absolute value. So January in 2009 was a negative 5 4/10 degrees Celsius. So the absolute value of negative 5 4/10, remember absolute value can never be negative, it's distance, it has to be positive, so it would be a positive 5 4/10. Let's skip on down to your turn and do some examples here. It says graph each number on the number line, then use your number line to find each absolute value. So negative 4 5/10 would be halfway between negative 4 and negative 5. 1 1/2 would be halfway between 1 and 2, positive. 4 would be right here. Negative 3 1/4. So we got a negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So negative 3 1/4 would be between negative 3 and negative 4, but close to negative 3. Okay, then if I want to find the absolute value, again, it's distance, so it would be the positive. So it would be 4 5/10 is the absolute value of negative 4 5/10. Absolute value of 4 stays at 4, because again it's distance, so it's positive. 1 1/2 would be 1 1/2. Negative 3 1/4 would be a positive 3 1/4. So again, it's not opposite, it's absolute value. It's going to always be positive, except for 0, which would be 0. Okay, so let's do some examples. Let's graph each number and its opposite on a number line. So negative 2.8 would be between 2 and 3 and really close to negative 3. So it would be there. So its opposite would be 1, 2, really close to positive 3. So that would be the opposite there. So it would be positive 2.8 is its opposite. 4.3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4.3 is less than half, so it would be about there. And the opposite would be negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. So it would be between negative 4 and negative 5. So the opposite would be negative 4.3. Negative 3 4/5. 1, 2, 3 4/5 would be between negative 3 and negative 4, close to negative 4. And the opposite would be a positive 3 4/5, between 3 and 4 and close to 4. So a positive 3 4/5 would be the opposite. 1 1/3, between 1 and 2, closer to 1. So the opposite would be between negative 1 and negative 2, closer to negative 1. The opposite would be negative 1 1/3. And here it says find the opposite of each number. Opposite of 3 7/800 would be negative 3 7/800. Opposite of negative 7 5/12 would be positive 7 5/12. Opposite of 0 0. 4 2/10 would be negative 4 2/10. 12.1 would be negative 12.1. And 2.6 would be a negative 2.6. All right. Explain why 2 1/15 and negative 2 1/15 are opposites. Same distance from 0. On a number line. Okay, so let's find absolute value. So absolute value of 5.23 again cannot be negative, so it stays at 5.23. Negative 4 2/11, again, absolute value is distance, so a positive 4 2/11. 0 is 0. Negative 6 3/5 would be a positive 6 3/5. Negative 2 1200 would be a positive 2 1200. And 8 2/10 would be a positive 8 2/10. Okay, so that concludes our lesson on identifying opposites and absolute values of rational numbers.